Hi, everybody. So today I have the pleasure of being with John Chapman, sitting in his room, which is actually a treat for me. I don't normally come to other people's studios, but John and I have been working on a lot of score work together. He primarily, if I'm not mistaken, works primarily in the score world. And we have the privilege of having a little further window into his world. I'm very familiar with what he expects from me when he passes a project over to mastering, and what the composers that he then brings to me, everything that's involved in terms of my process from beginning to end. But I don't really have a very good idea of what that looks like for you. I have a pretty good idea, but in terms of a more detailed view into your world, I'd love to learn more about that.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you asked. My process generally begins with a client coming to me and telling me about their project, obviously, but telling me about like what the scope of it is. Like, what are we doing? Are we recording orchestra? Are we going to do a band? Are we going to be doing this in LA? Are we going to be doing this in London? And then that generally starts the process of informing me how I'm going to approach the mix on this, or approach recording, or whatever we're doing. Today, we're looking at Creed 3, which I did with the wonderful composer Joe Shirley late last year in 2022, and it came out just a few weeks ago, and it turned out fantastic. But it started with Joe calling me into his room, he's next door to me, to do a little vocal session. Actually, one of the first things that we did on this project was we did some vocals for this cue, which is this wonderful singer, and the director wanted these like really operatic moments. So we actually spent some time just capturing these vocals right here. Let me just play them for you if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's just these opera sounds, right? So, you know, from the get-go, I was like, oh, this is going to be something really interesting and something special, you know?
Yeah.
I could really tell the direction that he was wanting to go with this, right? And so, you know, a few more weeks go by, and it kind of shapes out a bit more, and he's telling me, you know, it's going to be like a full orchestral score. We're going to record it at Warner Brothers. We're going to do it all in the room together, which is something that I only get to do every now and then, right? Most people want to stripe, want to do brass separate from strings, separate from percussion, separate from winds, all these things.
Yeah.
So we piled everybody during these COVID times into a room at Warner Brothers. We had a nice sized brass section, a nice string section. That's where we started. One thing Joe is really good at is arranging and orchestrating. And I can't emphasize it enough how important that aspect of the music making process, how important it is to the mix, right? So I want to just say that this is really well orchestrated.
What makes it so? I mean, I have my own understanding of that, but for everybody out there, why is that so important in your opinion?
So it's a piece of music, right? And there's melodies, and there's rhythms, and there's things that push the music along, right? And you know, I'm by no means a music theory professor or an orchestrator myself, so I'm going to speak to you as a listener. So when you have a good orchestrator, you have somebody who's essentially mixing before you mix it. They're taking into consideration whether or not other voices, and by voices I mean instruments, are getting in the way of what's important. Are they emphasizing what needs to be emphasized? Are they providing support? You know, are they leading us to the next section? You know, there's these things that are just, they can be overlooked or they can be underthought, you know? So, I mean, it's just incredible the difference between something that's really well orchestrated versus something that may not have had as much time on it. So.
Yeah, certainly. You know, this is so much a thing in my world, but I always say that the music does so much of the talking. You know, I understand we can have conversations before I hear anything at all, and you can give me all these adjectives to describe what something is, or you know what I should expect. But as soon as I press play, all of that is revealed to me, and I understand the brains at work. You know, I understand the decisions made, and it kind of goes to what you're saying. You know, in terms of the arranging, the arrangements themselves, how things have enough space, one thing takes over for the other. You don't have to find that in the mix. It's already done even before you touch anything at all.
100%.
And that completely influences all the decision making down the line.
Absolutely. I mean, and so I'm just going to play a little bit of the orchestra here just so you all hear how beautiful this is.
If you're looking to take your music and mixes to the highest professional level, check out the Ultimate Mastering course. Gavin and Reuben cover mastering multiple genres with over 23 hours of in-depth tutorials, lessons, and interviews. They share insights into the art of listening and enable you to understand the techniques and processes you need to achieve the goals of mastering.
But you see how well balanced this is? I mean, we can just listen to this tree mics. These are 3 microphones. And let me play. You get the full image of the orchestra in that little slice there, and that's just from the 3 main microphones, right? You hear the brass really well, you hear the strings really well. That's attributed to the orchestration, 100%. So now that we've arrived at this point where we're going to record, we know where we're going to record, the conversation I then shifts to what am I delivering? Who am I delivering to? In this case, we delivered in 7.1.2 to the dub stage so that they could mix with the Atmos bed that I'm providing. In addition to that, I provided elements that I thought would be good, in an Atmos setting to be panned in a creative way on the stage. And generally, it's not my role to decide those things. I would hate for a filmmaker to get to a dub stage and go, what the heck is going on? Why is this flying all over the place? So what I do is I provide, generally I provide stereo or mono stems in addition to surround bed stems so that the dubbing mixer can decide if they want to pan it around or not, or do both.
That's such a beautiful pro thing that I like to just note, that you're anticipating what could happen and making sure your bases are covered no matter what the decisions are. That's something that comes up a lot in our world, and I just want to.
Are you calling me a professional?
I'm calling you a professional, sir. Nice job. Nice job.
You're the first person. When we get into the room, into the recording process, then we spend time, shaping things. We're playing against what we call prelays, which are oftentimes synths or maybe some percussion or pre-recorded elements that we're not going to replace. So that's the first opportunity on the scoring stage to kind of listen down to everything, pick out any conflicts, change things in the music, and then after we do that, we get to the mix stage. So the mix stage at the front, it's a lot of kind of like not figuring things out, but it is figuring things out. I kind of in my brain, for hours and days before I start mixing something, I'm planning it out, and sometimes those plans work and sometimes those plans don't work. So generally, I spend my first day kind of figuring out if what I was thinking is actually a good idea or not. That includes like reverb settings, the way I'm panning the reverbs, the way I'm sending to the reverbs. On this film, I have this beautiful plugin here called Symphonia 3D, which I'm using. Don't copy my settings, anybody. And then I'm using a second reverb in quad, but I'm doing it in a left surround, right surround configuration, which I've spent a lot of time fiddling with and still don't have it right. But I have it. I mean, what is right? I still am playing with it. Let's put it that way. But I was happy with what I got on this for sure. In addition to that, I have some effects reverb, some delays, and an LFE send. That's the boring stuff. None of it's boring. I'm just joking.
Let me ask you a little bit about that. Before you even start a mix session, you already have ideas in your head. You've already anticipated things based off all your pre-work. And now you're here mixing, and you find that a lot of those things work. A lot of those things kind of inform your next decisions along the way. Maybe you could put us a little bit in your driver's seat here and play us something as you're discovering it, or maybe what you did along the way to discover it.
So the composer had these shouts. Are these the prelay ones? Right? And so we recorded choir to try and mimic this or to complement it, right? I think at the end of the day, we decided that complementing it was better. So as you can see, I did a bit of work to try and accomplish that. This is one of those things where I kind of had to uncover it as I went. So let me play you actually how it was before. So that was at Warner Brothers. I think we had 12 singers. And obviously I was like, okay, so whatever I'm doing has to be kind of precise and then really affected. So the first thing I did was I edited them, right? Which got this really, this really short thing that I have more control over.
Right.
Because a lot of this sound is actually the effects, like it's the reverb and it's the delays, right?
Yes.
So those need to be the most important aspect. Well, the point source is the most important aspect. The other bits are the second important bit.
Right. If you had that extended and without cutting those, it would get really muddy.
Yeah, it'd get muddy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to have that, and that the effects. You have to give space between those edits so the effects can do what the intention
Exactly.
is. Yeah.
And then I said, let me ruin somebody's day, and so I gave them this EQ, which I'm joking, everybody. I didn't ruin anybody's day. I'm just which kind of filtered off obviously the things that I'm not hearing in the frequencies that I'm not hearing in the samples. And then I went to this guy or this girl, because why not? I wanted to control the dynamics a little bit and kind of roughen it up, if you will. And then I get a bit more roughness. Who am I? So, beginning. That's where we are now.
Sure.
And then we got into the delays and the reverb, which gave us this. Right?
Great.
Which sounds fantastic. And then I said, why not, John? Open it up, baby. And so I put this bad boy on it, which just basically opens it up to 7.1, 7.1.2, 7.0.2.
Okay.
Just to fill the space out, right?
Fantastic.
Because this works great in these situations. I was really happy in the stereo world. And that complemented with this becomes the sound.
Fantastic.
So
are we able to hear that in context with everything else?
Absolutely. Let me give you a little bit of runway.
I love that you showed us that automation with the fab filter there too, because you have to let it bloom and expand. I'm curious. Oh yeah, I guess it cuts off right there. It dives back down. I was curious why you had it come back down on that.
Well, really, I'm just following the shape of what the composer was doing in this situation, which he was opening the envelope, then reopening it, and he opens it back up into this, obviously this moment here. So it's effective.
Sure.
It is definitely effective. Yeah. So this was a bit of me fiddling and where am I going? How am I getting there? That happened. I would say that early in my career, there's a lot more fiddling with things like orchestra, just because you're learning, right? So I do a lot less fiddling now with this type of thing, but I'm always experimenting in terms of like how I'm recording something, the orientation in the room, the balance in the room. So maybe having more strings or more violins versus more basses, or or more brass. So we're always kind of learning and experimenting in that regard.
I always find that the longer we do this, we learn what not to do. And you have your tools that you have in your back pocket to pull out based off the situation at hand.
Totally.
And that's part of what experience brings, is that whatever's thrown on your desk and whatever type of configuration you're presented with, you know exactly what tool to pull out for what reason, and you anticipate the end result. And it might vary or change a little bit along the way, but you at least have a pretty clear intention, or in your mind's eye, you know where you want it to be, and you know exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
And that just comes with doing this day in, day out.
No, never exactly how to get there, but
A pretty good idea.
you have a map.
Yeah.
You can see here that I'm doing a lot of, in these situations like percussion. You'll get some LFE synths going, and I'm doing a lot of putting things in a space. When it comes to the pre-recorded material, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing is putting things in a space. Both with like reverb, but also with panning. So that's it. That's how you mix.
I would like to hear one big build, and maybe
yeah.
could you show us, John, maybe one of the big climaxes in this, and then
Yeah,
how
definitely.
and all the things that are involved? Because one thing I noticed on this score when working on it is really how these big crescendos really climax and how they really really bloom, and all the things that are involved in that can be such a subtle and delicate thing. I would love to hear that and see how you build that.
In this cue, this is the void when they're fighting, and it's kind of like a really operatic moment. And there's these moments where they get knocked down and they get back up, right? I think that's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a good example of a good rise moment, right? There's this build, and everything it's not completely narrow, but it's more narrow, right? It's more sparse. So I'm actually I'm kind of constricting the field a little bit. So keeping things up front more or less, basically until we get this big choir moment, and then it just opens up, right? And it's more grand.
Yes.
In that moment. So that's a perfect example of how mixing can kind of.
And in order to get that, because I know how to get that type of thing in my world, I start at the end and then see how I can get to that end place.
Sure.
Is that similar in your world, where you kind of have to see where you end up and then work backwards from that place?
Yeah, so my puzzle is a little bit different. If you're talking about like amplitude, right? I generally will be like, hey, what is my max moment? Like, and then let's try and work backwards from there. So I'm not starting at 11. I'm building to 11.
Right.
But again, this gets into like on the scoring stage, right? I'm saying to myself, and we're shaping this in the performance as well. Like, if you listen to this, what's happening? I mean, you can see that there's not much happening. There's a lot happening, but you don't have these big brass moments or this big choir moment until then, right? So what I'm doing, and what we're all on the stage, we're realizing when these moments need to happen in the music, and we're allowing them to happen, right? We're not telling the orchestra to be quiet. We're like, play out then, right? And I will support it, with automation maybe, or maybe I'll send more reverb, or I'll put more in the rears to kind of help get it there. But everything I do is perfect, so I never have to worry about having enough headroom.
Well, no, that's a big important part is finding where you are. One thing I'm always really impressed with score mixes from you is that when I receive it in mastering, it's very consistent. The dynamic range, the dynamic builds from cue to cue.
We will get into this in my Spiderhead thing.
Okay.
You can see that. You'll be able to see that.
So right now, as far as I understand it, we're in 712. This is what you're mixing for the dub stage.
Yes.
And then you have a sum down to stereo from here, also in this session. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, but this is my so in this session here, this is just my my dirty little 2 mix, like what I'm going to send the client home with so they can listen in their car, right?
Right.
This isn't like the finished product. My goal during this portion of things is to get a good mix to the stage.
Mhm.
And then my brain will switch to the stereo mix when I'm doing the album.
Great. And that's going to be a different session.
It's going to be a different session.
And we're going to see that next.
We're going to see that next.
All right, let's see it. Okay, so now we are in your Pro Tools session preparing for the soundtrack release in stereo.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
This does not have the cue that we just saw in it. We're going to look at that cue. But we were talking about consistency.
Yes, I had mentioned that. I was very impressed with the fact that once I hear portions of the score, it seems to be very much in a particular place before you hand it off to me.
Yeah. So what I do is write a lot of automation. I want this to be the best it can be. This is beyond the movie. This is something that the composer is going to have for the rest of their life. It's going to be played the most, I think, more than the movie. So I want to make sure that it's the best it can be. So what I do is I compile. You'll see here. These are actually the stems that we send to the dub stage.
Mm-hmm.
So in this cue, which is a Showtime promo, I have up here. We have our orchestra stem. I'm just going to solo it. As well as our Orc B, which in this case was, I put guitar on that for some reason, probably for separation. You have your low perk, timpani, everything. And then I have in here my full 10 mix. And that is because I want to be able to reference it. I want the fold down to be a good representation of the full mix. Mm-hmm. So I spend time with this beautiful plugin here, and I write parameters like you wouldn't believe for this, because some cues are served better hearing more of the rears, and some cues are served more hearing the left and the right. Mm-hmm. So I spend on each cue just a good amount of time making sure that the fold down itself represents the music best. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that adds to consistency, mm-hmm. is that I'm making the music more of where the space I think it should be in. In addition to that, I spend a lot of time, when you do a fold down, obviously things are different, right? Mm-hmm. Things change. I also spend a lot of time like EQing EQing down or raising things that I think need them. And in this case, my stereo mixes, I want them to be a bit brighter, have more presence, especially in the orchestra than the film mix. So I'll add stuff. I'll also probably cut. You can see here I'm cutting. I'll probably cut in some situations just because low end is, it's different.
If I may, one thing that I want to note is when you're painting on your canvas in 712, you're making all of your musical decisions while monitoring through this big array.
Exactly.
And to fit them into a stereo container without making it sound like you fit it into a container, as though it always existed this way, mm-hmm. as though you always mixed it, if you mixed it from this way from the get-go. That is really the intention, making sure that all of your musical decisions work. I don't want to say container because that's actually what you're trying to avoid. You want to sound like it just always existed without anybody feeling like you took something from over here and put it over here. Am I right in saying that?
You're exactly right. Have you done this before?
Yeah. Can you believe it? Well, I know that that's something that we're certainly up against in Atmos, in immersive formats, because that's more of an automated thing. Although we can certainly monitor in the fold down and make adjustments, and then that's part of certainly what we're doing. Mm-hmm. But in this case, you aren't necessarily doing any type of binaural fold down. You're doing a stereo fold down, but you have the ability to do whatever you need to get there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do, I wouldn't say I do a lot, but I do a lot. But there's a lot of things I consider. That's what I should say. I should say I'm not doing a lot, but I'm actually I'm taking a lot into consideration. Mm-hmm. My fold down. This is the most important step, I would say, okay. Because this really shapes the space in which the mix lives, mm-hmm. right?
And this first plugin you're talking about.
This is Pentio.
Yes, the Pentio, and that it's very much to do with the arrangement and where the arrangement is panned in the 712. Yeah, in order to take the best from that place and bring it into
exactly.
stereo.
Think of it as like a you're going like this, right? So it's like these are the left and the right? Hello, and these are the rears here, right? You're going like this. It's a tilt, right? Mm-hmm. Or at least that's the way that I.
No, I love that concept.
I visualize it.
Yes.
And then if you guys really want to know what I do, I'm writing all types of stuff. I'm you get different build-ups of frequencies, and you find yourself being like, oh, I don't really like the way that sounded. So you notch it out, or you go, oh, maybe I need to keep it brighter here. And so that's what this is. And this is also always kind of moving around from track to track.
It's important to note whenever you're taking anything and from various channels and summing them to less channels, generally you get all that bottom buildup.
Totally.
It exists in many ways, and it seems like it exists here just the same way. So you're compensating for that.
I am compensating for that.
Yeah.
And we're also compensating at this stage here.
Okay.
A little bit of, we added some gain and we reduced some gain.
Okay.
I used to use the Varimu, the Manly, but I switched
This
to
is what the Varimu was based off of.
I mean, this is, why not, right? This is more broadband EQ. This, again, changes from Q to Q. I'll sometimes do a roll-off here. Did I do one here? Yeah, I did one here. So I'm a smart boy. So, I add a lot of, this is where I add a lot of presence, to be honest with you. I love this plugin. I love, Manly is great, just in general.
Shout out Ivana.
Yeah, hello. And then this is my, gosh, I don't judge me too much. I'm not doing too much, trust me. This is where I kind of add some stuff back in, and I also cut some stuff. But I use this primarily to cut some really annoying frequencies, generally in the 3K to 10K range. I use this to add a little bass back in. I add this to add a little bit of presence back in. I add this for some stereo width. Shh, don't tell anybody. I also use this as a de-esser, which I'm so glad I learned about de-essing.
Oh, tell us about that, because I use a de-esser in probably similar ways than you do. Not to take out S's, but to shape the overall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, when you're younger, you hear more, right? But when I was younger, I was always like, why is everything so bright? Why is everything so bright? Why is everything I'm doing feel so bright? And so I would just do like roll-offs, right? And this was not, this is a long time ago. And then I was like, this can't be what people are doing. Like, nobody's doing this, right? So then I was like, okay, should I be notching out a bunch of stuff? And I was like, no, that's not right. And so I was like, okay, what other tools do I have here? And I was like, we use this de-essing stuff to remove like these high-end sibilants. So why couldn't it be used in these situations, right? So that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm using the de-esser to kind of remove the harshness from the track. I mean, this kicks in. It kicks in more than you would think, and it really kind of just helps even out the top end. I mean, am I wrong?
No, not at all. I'm no stranger to that at all. And it's more of a gentle way. It's very fast. Generally, de-essers are acting very fast, and they can just soften the upper frequencies, and it allows you to then work up against that. At least in my world, I'll open things
100.
up with EQ into something that's clamping down on it to create a nice open yet smooth and soft top.
Yeah.
Without any edginess, especially working on things that could sound a little edgier digital.
Totally. I mean, I use, do you know Fab Filter?
Certainly.
Of course you do. Everyone does. I use the Pro MB a lot as my de-esser.
Yes.
Just like almost like
de-esser.
last stage, just not 100%, but just something that's there to kind of I can mix into.
Yeah, and it's a very, very versatile. You can really tune that however you want. And I use that in Immersive quite a bit.
It's a great plugin.
Yeah.
Now don't get mad at me, Reuben.
Okay. Oh, okay. Did I turn you onto this one?
Well, you turned me onto the plugin because I love Overstayer.
Yes.
But I use this as something to be aggressive sometimes, but also to kind of give me consistency.
Okay.
I think this, and obviously, like, there's many ways to provide consistency for things, right? And I've used tape emulation. I've used like exciters. You can do these types of things. This is my best way to provide some consistency and to actually bring in some color to the mix.
Yes. It does a lot. I'm a fan of this. I use this in a very minimal way. In fact, we might show you this back at our place because we use it on one of the scores that you mixed as well.
All right.
But it allows for us to sometimes, what I found this does is that it compresses without compressing. It folds everything to the middle and then pushes everything outward. It kind of gives everything gravity and a bloom at the same time, and gives it a little bit of distressor type of saturation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, watch me push play and nobody hears the difference. But should we A and B it?
Sure.
Is that something that we should do?
Absolutely. And I can tell just by you taking just the overstayer out and in that you've EQ'd and shaped around what that overstayer is doing. If that was never there to begin with, you wouldn't have that sound minus the overstayer. It's all part of one whole. It's very much like how building a mastering chain. You know, one thing is in relation to everything else around it, and that's evident when you flick that on and off there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great tool. This was my album mix session for the Void. So you can see here that I'm using the same chain, but what they've done is they've actually edited the cue for this for the album essentially, and they added a few things to kind of just enhance the experience, which I thought was pretty cool. So why don't we just play a bit and you know, can see why I'm so consistent. So that's what it looks like, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Thanks for taking us a little further into your world. What do you say we take that back to our place and show you how we mastered it?
Sure thing. Should we roll there?
Let's roll.